Hello, what is up? I am coming in here by the skin of my teeth. Hope you are all doing well this Wednesday afternoon. It is now afternoon. Um, Welcome. I am alternate juror, also known as AJ, and to some people as the apparently new gossip queen. Don't know. Hello, Tracy. How are you? Miss Gabby, good to see you. Kelly, so proud of you today. Hope everything went well and that you are doing good. I see that gets what's here. We got a squid raid. Flash fan. Oh my goodness, my daughter's here. Hello, Sir Frank Otter. I don't know why I said it like that. I think it was because I've been reading too many court transcripts here recently. And I have mainly forgot how to talk. Flashman, did I say hey to you? Hello, Flashman. Always. Today we are going to talk about Stephen D. Richards. He also known as the Nebraska Fiend, and apparently the Monster of Ohio. I'm not sure about the Monster of Ohio part because he didn't really do anything in Ohio. So I don't know why he was that. I didn't see anything in the story that I was looking at. I'll continue because I'm a little curious, but this guy was kind of a wackadoodle, as most are. But he confessed to unaliving between 9 and 11 people in a very short period of time. So from 1876 to 1878. Um, there's some details in here that are not great. There are some children involved. And so, but most of the stuff I have made YouTube friendly as I can, but sometimes it really just kind of takes away from that. I do have some pictures of him that I'll get to at the end. I think I can show one. It might get me in trouble, but it'll just be brief and it'll be at the very end and maybe nobody will notice. But just so you can see what I'm looking at, this is what I'm looking at. So, Carmen, you're so funny. I did. Be glad I didn't know him personally because I probably wouldn't be here right now because he would have unalived me. This guy, this guy. So most of you probably already know this, but those of you that don't, I am originally from Nebraska. So this area that he was active in, I'm very familiar with. My aunt and uncle actually live in the town that, well, my uncle's not, he passed away, but currently. So, and it's a little town. I'm surprised that this actually happened in that town. It's a town of about 2,200 people. So I was very shocked to when I read that that was there. Yes, Flash fan. But you were thinking it just because you didn't say. We all know you think I'm old, but you are now 1/4 of a century. So welcome to the oldie club. Yes, Carmen, it is good to have you back. I'm glad you're feeling better. And, are alive. So, Stephen D. Richards, the Nebraska Fiend. Fiend? I don't know. He was born on March 18th in 1856 in Wheeling, West Virginia. He was said to have 5 sisters and 1 brother. Maybe that's where everything went wrong. We all know how siblings can be. He resided with his family until the age of 20. After leaving home, he resided in Iowa for a short time, working as a farmhand, and was later hired as an assistant in the Iowa Lunatic Asylum in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Yes, this will be around Kearney and the Minden area, Grand Island, Hastings, around that area. So yes, more east. So he, so as he worked at the Iowa Lunatic Asylum in Mount Pleasant, he was tasked with burying deceased patients. He later reported this to be a significant event in his life that shaped his own view on humanity and view on the human race. Mr. Richards reflected that during his tenure of handling and disposing of deceased patients, he became accustomed to viewing people as nothing more than meat. So, when I read that and I saw that, all I could think of, I mean, he obviously went way darker than this, but a lot of us, and I'm not even saying, and I'm not like justifying this, but if you, and I'm not a police officer, but you take police officers, lawyers, doctors, probably even judges, anybody that works in fields where they see a lot of crap, they get desensitized. I'm sorry to say it that way. And we all, uh, we get in trouble on here for having a dark sense of humor sometimes because we have read and seen some really dark um, trials, cases, and sometimes you have to. This guy just got desensitized to everything, it sounds like, and didn't really care anymore whatsoever. You will see how he continues to devolve. Yes, Nebraska does have good donuts. Daylight donuts are the best. Are the best. I know, Kelly. I was like, wow. Well, he had a horrible job burying the deceased, and then was like, look at you, you beef cattle, whatever, you piece of meat. Yummy. Uh, he left the asylum in October 1876 and began drifting around the Midwest. He would find intermittent work and occasionally consorted with train robbers. Dang train robbers. He stayed in Kansas City briefly before moving on to Nebraska. He arrived in Kearney, residing there for 2 to 3 weeks, keeps this in mind, before leaving for Cheyenne County, which I believe is going to be out by Sydney, if I got that right. Sir Frank Otter. Uh, Mr. Richards reported he was involved in several pew pew fights during his brief stay in Kearney, 2 to 3 weeks, resulting in him, I hate to use this phrase, but pow-powing each individual, although he stated he was unaware of their condition after their encounter. So he didn't stick around to see what happened to the people that he had to get in a fight with for his short 2 to 3 week stay in Kearney. After his final arrest, Mr. Richards admitted to unaliving 4 men during his travels around Nebraska and Iowa between 1876 and 1877. He described committing his first unaliving sometime in late 1876, 2 weeks after arriving in Kearney. So maybe he should not have went to Kearney. All right. Sir Frank Otter, I used to live in Keith County, if you are familiar with that area. That is where I was born. So here's victim number 1. Mr. Richards said he met a man while traveling on horseback through the Nebraska countryside. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Exactly. That's our license plate number out there. They decided to camp for the night near Town, which is a ghost town. I had to look at that up because I had never heard of that. So it's a ghost town now. It doesn't exist anymore. And then it said that several newspapers reported that they camped near the Sandhills. I don't know how. That was confusing to me with the layout out there. So it is a small world. For sure. I'm impressed. I'm impressed that you got it. I lived in Ogallala. Most people can't even say that name. So I generally don't even try to tell people where I lived because they're like, "What?" After settling down for the night, the 2 men began gambling in a game of cards, with Mr. Richards winning most of the other man's money. As the 2 set off for Kearney, The following morning, the man turned on Mr. Richards and demanded his money back. Mistake number one. Well, mistake number one was saying hi to Mr. Richards as they passed each other. Mistake number two was camping with Mr. Richards. Mistake number three was gambling with Mr. Richards. And his ultimate mistake was demanding his money back. Mr. Richards refused and claimed the other man became belligerent. Mr. Richards then pow-powed him above the left eye, unaliving him instantly. And after confirming the man was deceased, he disposed of his body in the Platte River. I did not. I did not live in Aunt's wagon. I lived in a town named after the Ogallala Indians. Thank you, Gabby. That was his first victim. No name on that. Very quick-tempered, Mr. Richards. Victim number 2. As Mr. Richards continued his travels to Kearney, he encountered another man outside an area called Walker's Ranch. The man had seen Mr. Richards and the previous traveler, the aforesaid mentioned man, together, and he asked what had become of that man. While talking to him, Mr. Richards realized this man and the deceased man were friends and business partners. Mr. Richards denied any knowledge of the deceased man, but his friend continued to ask Mr. Richards questions. Mistake. Which caused Mr. Richards to become increasingly anxious. Believing the man knew too much, Mr. Richards decided to unalive the strangers to prevent the discovery of his other unaliving. When the stranger turned his back to Mr. Richards, he was pow-powed in the back of the head. He disposed of the corpse and sold the man's horse in a nearby town. He's a friendly fella. Before reaching Kearney, Mr. Richards stopped at the home of Jasper Harrelson. Remember this name, please. It will come up later. Who, according to Mr. Richards, was a train robber. Jasper's wife, Mary, also remember that name, noticed that Mr. Richards' shirt was stained with blood and commented on it. Shouldn't have done that, Mary. Mr. Richards had not noticed the blood on his clothes and replied, as if in jest, that it must have come from the men he had unalived. Just kidding. That ended the conversation. That is a very part of the story. It's going to kind of seem out of place right at the moment. It'll come back around. Trust me. We just call it OG Nation because outsiders cannot say it at all. Also the name of the, largest aquifer in the U.S. and the best water is out there. Our water here is... Victim 3. After his stay in Nebraska, Mr. Richards traveled to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where he used counterfeit money to buy a horse and buggy from an unidentified man. After Mr. Richards left, the seller discovered the bills were not genuine. The man tracked Mr. Richards down and demanded Mr. Richards give him real money or return his horse and buggy. Don't do that to Mr. Richards. Mr. Richards refused both demands. The man threatened to have him arrested, and Mr. Richards responded by pow-powing him and buried him and left the area. Mr. Richards. Naughty. Naughty, naughty. Victim 4. We actually get a name and I can't say it. In March 1877, Richards and a man named, I have no idea how to say it, Jim, I have no idea, left Grand Island, Nebraska, on horseback and headed towards Kearney. They stopped and camped for the night between Lowell and Kearney along the Platte River. Do not camp with Mr. Richards. Mr. Richards woke up around 3 a.m. and I don't know his name, telling him it was nearly morning and they should get back on the road. It infuriated the person's who's Gimli? I have no idea. infuriated him because he woke him up so early. He began arguing with Mr. Richards, and here's Mr. Richards' account of the argument. "It's a good thing you don't mean all you say," Mr. Richards said, "but I do mean it." Uh, Mr. I'm going to say Gemji said, the other man said. He said, "You don't want to mean it," Mr. Richards said, and he picked up his revolver and said, this is Mr. Gemji, "Here is something that backs all that I say," and cocked it. Mr. Richards looked at him and thought, the fool acts as if he means to shoot. And skipping out my little 33, I plugged him one in the head. That was the first trouble we had ever had. And the last trouble they had ever had. I was so floored reading all these things and how fast this guy evolved to doing all this, and he just never thought twice about, here, you get a bullet, and you get a round, and you get a round, all to the head. Enjoy. Hey, Jess, good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. We are talking about the Nebraska Fiend, and we are through his first 4 victims that he had, and he was not a nice fella. Yes, for sure. Very much a Wild West hustler. After leaving the area, Mr. Richards arrived at Kearney finally under the name F.A. Hogue. Mr. Richards reunited with some old acquaintances, George Dutch Henry Johnson and his companion Hurst, as well as a man who went by the name Mr. Burns. Sorry, when I typed it, I heard Gabby in my head saying, "Excellent." Mr. Richards was arrested on March 21st along with Mr. Burns. At the time, both men were not told the reason for their arrest, although Mr. Richards came to believe that it was for the unaliving of Gemji. I don't know. Eventually, the 2 men were notified by authorities that they were under suspicion for the unaliving of a man named Peter Gateway. I don't know why that changed. Whom Mr. Richards claimed his innocence over. Mr. Richards was acquitted, and Mr. Burns was held in custody because of the testimony of a quote-unquote sporting lady. I had to look up what a sporting lady was. Hey, Zach. You're not here? All right, I don't see you. Oh, yes. Like a nice and unaliver rarely do pair together. A sporting lady is a lady of the night, a lady that's looking for love in all the wrong places. So from her testimony, she kept him in jail. Mr. Burns would be acquitted at a later time after no evidence was found linking him to the crime. I don't know who unalived Mr. Peter Gateway. That's supposed to be Gateway. Don't know. Never came back up. All right, so I told you to remember the name Jasper Harrelson and Mary Harrelson. In June 1878, while in Kearney, Mr. Richards was arrested and jailed for theft. He claimed that this charge was unfounded. During this time in jail, he reunited with Mary Too much Jane Tobin. Mary L. Harrelson, the wife of Jasper Harrelson, the train robber. Mrs. Harrelson was arrested for allegedly aiding her husband in the escape of himself and another prisoner named Mr. Underwood or Mr. Nixon from the Kearney jail. Mr. Richards and Mary Harrelson agreed that she would sell him the deed to her property 6 months later for $600, which I think is around $20,000 today. So I don't know. Wasn't probably a lot of property then. After Mr. Richards was released from jail, he traveled around Nebraska for several months. He did business in Hastings, Bloomington, and Grand Island before arriving at the Harlesons' homestead on October 18th, 1878. Mary Harlson transferred the property to Mr. Richards upon his arrival, and he stayed there for several weeks. The New York, I don't, did you not just hear it, Zach? That I said, see, it just keeps coming. You gotta listen, Zach. It's trying to take over. It's trying to take over. Mary Harlson transferred the property to Mr. Richards upon his arrival, and he stayed there for several weeks. The New York Daily Herald reported that Mr. Richards married Mary Harlson on November 2nd. I'm not sure how they did that because she was already married to Jasper. Mary, you naughty lady. In an alleged scam to acquire ownership of the Harlsons' land. A month later, Mr. Richards unalived Mrs. Harlson and her 3 children. It's not funny. I'm not laughing at that. 10-year-old Daisy, 4-year-old Mabel, and 2-year-old Jasper, nicknamed Jesse. Mr. Richards claimed that Mary Harlson had discovered that he was guilty of unaliving. Well, no kidding. And he feared that she might tell authorities. You think? To silence her and to ensure that his crimes remain hidden, he did what? He committed more crimes and unalived the entire family. This is where there's some a little graphic content right here, so I will just warn you all right now. And this does involve the 3 children, so obviously don't have any pictures or anything like that to show, but I am going to read this, and it's not great. Yeah, Tracy, I don't know if he's related to Jolly Jane or not, but I'm beginning to feel like I might be. Kidding, I don't want to be. On November 3rd, 1878, Mr. Richards got up early along with a man named Mr. Brown, who had been staying at the house. Mr. Brown left to feed the horses and do some other chores around the farm. Mr. Richards found a spade and dug a hole. He then sneaked back into the house and unalived Mary, Daisy, Mabel, and Jesse with an axe. One report stated that Mary and one of the children were unalived with a smoothing iron, which I looked up. It's just an iron, while the other 2 were physically assaulted. This claim also reported by some modern-day sources who described Mr. Richards had unalived Jasper by hitting his head against the wall. However, these alternate details of the unalivings were refuted by Mr. Richards, saying he had unalived the family while they were asleep. He said most of them had passed away after the first several blows, except Daisy, who had writhed in pain for some time, by Mr. Richards' own account. I do not believe, and you'll see in a little bit, Jasper was not unalived here, because he's going to come back. So I don't know who thought Jasper was unalived at this point in time. I don't believe he was, because he comes back later and they don't talk about Jasper the ghost. It was not captured on a Ring camera. Darn it. I don't want you to have to put my trial in your court watch either, Flash fan. Oh, I forgot to shut the door. Sorry, got nails clicking here. Yes, it was Jasper the ghost. Sorry. All right, she doesn't want to stay. Mr. Richards was said to have scrubbed the blood off the floor and himself after the unalivings before calmly sitting down to breakfast. After he had eaten, he carried the bodies out of the house buried them in the hole he had dug nearby. When later questioned about the Harlesons' disappearance, Mr. Richards said the family had left with Mr. Brown and he did not know when they would return. And I don't know what happened to Mr. Brown in this situation. I don't know if he ended up in the hole too, or maybe in the river, or maybe he was able to survive and live and ran away. I don't know. The bodies of Mrs. Harleson, and her children were discovered on December 11th, 1878. I think that date up here is not correct. I think that is supposed to be December 3rd because it said it was a month later. Now we come to another victim. It is. You gotta eat. But could you not maybe do everything and then go eat? Like not the whole. I say, Mr. Brown, run on down to the barn and feed them their horses for 24 hours. Zach. Huh. All right, so we move on to December 9th, 6 days later. On December 9th, 1878, Mr. Richards agreed to help his neighbor, a 26-year-old immigrant from Sweden named Peter Anderson, with some work on Anderson's property. The Columbus Journal reported that Mr. Richards had used the name Dick Richardson when working for Mr. Anderson. It's not a very... I wonder if that was his middle name. On December 9th, 1878, Mr. Anderson became ill after eating a meal prepared for him by Mr. Richards, causing him to suspect Mr. Richards had poisoned him. Mr. Anderson told a neighbor of his suspicions. The next day, Mr. Anderson confronted Mr. Richards. That was a mistake. The two men fought. Another mistake. And Mr. Richards either beat Mr. Anderson to death with a hammer or a hatchet or pow-powed him. Anderson's body was later discovered in the cellar of his house, buried underneath a pile of coal. Mr. Richards strongly denied poisoning Anderson, saying that it was not his style. The other part was, but not the poison. All right, just wanted to clear that up for you. That's what Mr. Richardson said. He claimed Mr. Anderson had attacked him with a knife and that he unalived Mr. Anderson in self-defense. Mr. Anderson was later buried at Bethany Cemetery in Axtell, Nebraska. Oh, he's definitely on the naughty list. See you, Zach. Go to your work. But yeah. It was self-defense. Oh, Cameron. He got more than a lump of coal, Flashman. So now Mr. Richards is on the run. Mr. Richards, fled Kearney shortly after Mr. Anderson's unaliving, expecting the bodies would soon be discovered, and he was correct. As he was hitching up Mr. Anderson's horses and preparing to leave, some of Mr. Anderson's neighbors arrived. They had noticed Mr. Anderson's absence and questioned Mr. Richards about it. Mr. Richards reportedly told them Mr. Anderson was inside the house. As Mr. Anderson's neighbors entered the dwelling, Mr. Richards fled on horseback, riding to Bloomington. He traveled east by horse and train and on foot, passing through Omaha and Chicago. While on the run, he met up with Jasper Harleson. So obviously he didn't hit his head. And Mr. Harleson's fellow escaped prisoner. The three traveled through Wheeling, West Virginia, and into Ohio. And at the time, I think it said Wheeling was part of Virginia. I don't know. I don't care. into Ohio, passing through Bridgeport before arriving in Richard's hometown of Mount Pleasant. Nebraska Governor Silas Garber issued an arrest warrant for Mr. Richards on December 16, 1878, and promised a reward of $200 for his arrest and conviction. No posse to chase him. He gets captured. He does not stay on the run very long. He's good at unaliving, not good at hiding. I haven't had a chance to even look for those yet, Flash fan, but I'm going to. I don't, because they would be interesting. Because this guy, oh, never mind. Spoiler alert. Capture. Most accounts state that on December 20th, 1878, Mr. Richards arrived in Mount Pleasant, Ohio. He attended a ballroom dance accompanied by two unidentified women who are lucky to be alive. Copies of a wanted poster featuring Mr. Richard had been circulated throughout the town, and a constable named McGrew recognized him from the poster. With the help of a penitentiary guard named Folge, something, the two men armed themselves with pew-pews and set off after Mr. Richards. They found him walking through a field outside of town with the two women. He was unarmed and quickly surrendered. Mr. Richards claimed that he had spotted the officers approaching him. Intending to fight his way out of the situation, he told the women to head back to town. They refused because they're women. I'm kidding. Kinda. So, Mr. Richards chose to surrender because the women wouldn't leave his side. He's so pleasant. He said that if the women had left, he would have avoided arrest. Mr. Richards' words. If I hadn't had the two girls with me, I guess the constable, McGrew, who arrested me, would have been a dead man. Either of us would, or I'd have shot. And he was unarmed. Not sure what he was gonna do. Carmen, this guy reminds me of Emilio Estevez playing Billy the Kid in Young Firearms. I probably can't say the name of that movie because it's YouTube. Richard said that if he had escaped, he would have gone to Nebraska, as he reasoned that is the last place anyone would have looked for him. Maybe. Some accounts differed about the date and place of Richard's arrest. The Wheeling Daily Intelligencer, Flash fan, it's not a 1929 movie, but it was probably made before you were born. And it's really good. It's a good movie. The Wheeling Daily Intelligencer said that upon arriving in a town near Mount Pleasant, Ohio, sorry, thought I had silenced my phone. I don't even know why that made a noise. Now it's silenced. Sorry. Richards was identified by an acquaintance who detained him with the help of another person. One source claims that Mr. Richards was arrested in early 1879 in Austin, Texas. One modern-day account reported that Mr. Richards, whom they listed under the name Samuel Richards, had been identified and captured by the Pinkerton agents. Carmen, that better not been you. Yeah, I got mail. I got something. I don't know. I don't know about that, Gabby. There were even conflicting descriptions of Richard's appearance. Newspapers described him as being approximately 6 feet 2 inches tall and heavily built, with dark hair and blue eyes. However, the account of Dr. Moreland, who performed the phrenological examination of Mr. Richards before his execution. Oh, Carmen is now really texting me. Conflicted with these descriptions of him. In his examination report, Dr. Moreland said Mr. Richards had light brown hair and dark gray eyes. At his execution, one spectator later described Mr. Richards as having steel gray eyes that were almost bluish in color and dark brown hair. I don't know that it matters. Oops, I forgot a 9. The Working Man's Friend in Leavenworth, Kansas newspaper reported that Chicago authorities received part of the $200 reward. I hope they spent it wisely. Flashman. Sure. I'm sure Vinny and I are going to be BFFs. Just you wait. After his arrest, Richards was jailed in Steubenville, Ohio. I don't know what's wrong. Jolly Jane got me all screwed up. While there, he wrote 2 articles. Now Gabby's texting me. Does somebody else want to text me? He wrote 2 articles for the local newspaper confessing to 9 unalivings in 3 years, which is really a lot because some of these that I have looked at, there's years between their victims. I mean, this guy was just like, oh, I don't like you. Here, take one, and I'll throw you away. Oh, you argued with me. I gambled and I won all your money, and then you wanted it back. I didn't like that. I mean, he just was like, I don't like you, then I unalive you. Sheriff David Anderson of Buffalo County, Nebraska, and Sheriff Martin of Kearney County, both of whom had pursued Richards to Ohio, returned him to Nebraska. Due to local public outrage, Sheriff Anderson and Sheriff Martin feared that Mr. Richards would be lynched if he were returned to any of the localities where he had committed his crimes. So it was decided to avoid taking him to these places initially. Probably smart. At the time of Mr. Richards' arrest, authorities suspected he was a member of a gang of outlaws who had plagued the state or even the group's leader. I don't think so. There's nobody else ever mentioned. And anybody else that was ever around him didn't survive. He would have to have like a new gang every day. And they wouldn't last. They'd probably have to have a new one by lunchtime. Law enforcement was able to definitely link Mr. Richards to the 9 unalivings to which he had confessed, and suggested that he might have unalived even more, something the Nebraska State Journal expressed doubt on. Shortly before his trial, Mr. Richards predicted that he would be convicted and hanged for his crimes. He was moved to a jail in Omaha on December 28, 1878, and then transferred to Kearney by train. On December 30th, 1878, a large crowd of enraged townsfolk gathered outside of the jail in Kearney where Mr. Richards was being kept. Fearing a lynching, authorities took extra precautions to ensure Mr. Richards' safety as well as their own. While being moved to the depot, Mr. Richards was said to have been impressed by the large crowd. Look at all those people here to see me. Asking whether the whole town was there to see him. I think they were, sir. Not for reasons you want. Eventually, the crowd dispersed, and there were no further incidents during the rest of his stay in Kearney. Omaha insurance. Hope he had Omaha insurance for his funeral. Maybe. They probably didn't want to insure him. Mr. Richards' trial began on January 16, 1879, in Minden, Nebraska. That's a very small town that I was telling you about. Shocked me that. So Kearney is about a drive in a car, modern, not horse and buggy, 20, 30 minutes away from Minden, and it's a much bigger town than Minden. So I don't know the size difference then between the two places. Kearney probably grew because it was there was an interstate built through there, you know how all that goes. It may have been Carmen. Carmen's been there. That's probably the most exciting thing that ever happened to Sleepy Minden. Could be. Could be. With Judge William Gasling presiding. The prosecution was led by a district attorney named Mr. Schofield, and Mr. Richards' defense attorney was led by a lawyer named Mr. Savage. I was like, that's appropriate for Mr. Richards' attorney to be named. Mr. Schofield laid out 2 indictments for unaliving in the first degree for the unalivings of the Harrelson family and Mr. Anderson. No. If they would be known for anything, it would probably be football. My uncle used to be the football coach there, and they were really, really good. But that was a while ago. Mr. Richards pled not guilty, arguing that Mr. Anderson's unaliving was in self-defense and therefore justifiable. The prosecution called 7 witnesses to the stand. I'm surprised they had any witnesses to call. They all testified to the state in which Mr. Anderson was found. Mr. Richards was then called to testify. When questioned by Mr. Schofield, he admitted to unaliving Mr. Anderson with the hammer after a heated argument, but reiterated that he had done so in self-defense. Mr. Richards said that although repeatedly, that sentence was written weird, that although he repeatedly warned Mr. Anderson not to do so, Mr. Anderson had reached for a nearby hatchet. The prosecution then entered into evidence the hammer that had been used to unalive Mr. Anderson. And in all his innocence, Mr. Richards identified it as the unaliving weapon. After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Richards guilty of the unalivings of the Harrelsons and Mr. Anderson. He was sentenced to death by hanging, and his execution date was set for April 26, 1879. Mr. Richards was described as being cheerful and indifferent to both the proceedings and his conviction. The Sedalia Weekly Bazoo, which when I read that, I laughed because I was like, Gabby's going to laugh at that. Shortly after his conviction, and she'd probably make a joke, Mr. Richards managed to smuggle a knife into his cell to use it for self-deletion, but the weapon was discovered by authorities and confiscated before he could use it. No other newspapers corroborate this story, however, or no other newspaper records corroborate this story. Oh, I'm waiting for it, Flash fan. I know. The defendant testified. I have a place that I'm gonna look. I just ran out of time trying to get everything kind of lined up this morning. Gabby must not be listening. Or she's cooking and her hands are full of chicken and she can't get to her keyboard. All right. Execution. When Mr. Richards was returned to Nebraska, the Omaha Herald wrote that he, quote unquote, okay, there we go. Just playing our kazoo. This should be sent to all law enforcement. They had it together in 1879 without technology. Well, there you go. I won't argue. That he manifested supreme indifference to his lot and was perfectly willing to be brought to Kearney Junction, and said that he had as soon died one way as another. He did not care. Oh, well, thanks, Carmen. After Mr. Richards' conviction, Sheriff Martin announced that his execution in Minden would be open to the public. Even though Sheriff Martin feared the attendance of many spectators could become violent. And yeah, to prevent a riot, an enclosure was constructed around the gallows to separate the expected crowd from Mr. Richards. However, they sold tickets that allowed admittance into the restricted area were sold. It's not like getting VIP seating at a concert or getting into whatever it's called when you get to sit down close there. I don't know. But yeah, they sold them. Good for them. Might as well earn some money. Anyway, Mr. Richards was allowed to invite people. I'm like, Who did he invite? Because anybody he ever met, he unalived. He chose members of the press whom he had befriended while in prison. Of course, one such ticket of admittance is now in the collection of the Nebraska Historical Society, and I did not get time to see if they had a picture. Maybe I'll look here in just a minute. Spectators at the execution were said to have numbered between 2,000 and 25,000. I don't know who was counting, but that's a huge difference. As the crowd became increasingly agitated, the authorities pleaded with them to stay outside the enclosure, but guards were unable to prevent the spectators from destroying the barrier. One witness in the incident, a man named Rolf Johnson, later wrote that 20 to 30 people in the crowd cut the rope as authorities tried to stop the crowd. The mob proceeded to pull the post out of the ground, attempting to drag the makeshift barrier away while the guards were pulling the rope at the other end in what Mr. Johnson described as a tug of war. The mob succeeded in pulling the rope away from the guards and then proceeded to destroy the barrier completely. At 1 p.m., Mr. Richards was led to the gallows by Sheriff Martin and his deputy. This pacified the crowd. Upon ascending the gallows, Mr. Richard launched into an impassioned defense of his actions. He again claimed that the unaliving of Mr. Anderson was in self-defense and disavowed any involvement in the unalivings of the Harrelson family. He claimed he was a victim of wrongful conviction. Wow. He then said he had found the Lord, made his peace with God, and had faith in Christ, and asked the crowd to join him in singing the hymn, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." If he was lying, I'm surprised he wasn't struck by lightning right there. One such spectator documenting the events of the execution in his journal observed that Mr. Richards appeared calm and collected during the entire ordeal. I think it's just because he has zero feelings. Mr. Richards' final words were said to have been, "Jesus be with me now." Reverend W. Sanford G., who presided over the execution, later told reporters he hoped Mr. Richards' profession of religious salvation were genuine, but allowed that they might not have been. Wonder why. At 1:17 p.m. on April 26, 1879, Mr. Richards was hanged. The St. Louis Globe-Democrat said it took 15 minutes for him to perish. That is a long time. Mr. Richards was the first person in Nebraska's history to be unalived by the state. This is on record because before Mr. Richards and before Nebraska became a state, there was somebody else that was hanged. So his crimes started taking place like right after Nebraska became a state, and one of the problems was the criminal code or whatever. It was new. Everything was very, very new, and so it probably changed after this. But yeah, 15 minutes. You know, they always make it seem like instant on TV. Well, okay, so he was the first person in Nebraska's history to be executed since its incorporation into the United States in 1867. So it was a young state. Shortly after his execution, a photographer was able to catch a photograph of Mr. Richards' corpse propped inside a coffin. I do have it. His full name is Stephen D. Richards. Thanks, Tracy. So, wonder if he just thought the name Dick Richardson was funny. Who knows? I don't know. This guy. I think that's all I have. I do have some pictures of him. Give me 1 second. Because I've got to get them. So, there is he did, like, give an interview. Oh, this is not the interview, but this is interesting. So this is let's see. Shut up, Gabby. Ah, goodness. I don't have audio. Why is it oh, I was like, "Why is it not sharing?" There it is. He looks he does look very normal for a person in 1878. Nebraska had a population of about 120. That's quite a bit considering how young of a state they were. 2,000,000. Ooh, not very many for that entire state, but so this is a newspaper article that I found um, about his neighbor. I don't have all of it. I just have what I could see. It just says the facts in the Kearney County unaliving are as follows. S.D. Richards, the unaliver, had been at work sometime for Mrs. Harrelson. They spell it differently. On the first day of November, he unalived her and her 3 children and then informed the neighbors that she had gone to her husband. His object seems to have been to secure her claim and her team. I assume he's meaning horses, together with a few household goods. Good for you, sir. The Swede, Peter Anderson, lived alone in a neighboring house. On Tuesday, Richards gave him a dose of poison and supposed that he had left him for dead, but Anderson survived sufficiently to go to a neighbor's house and tell his suspicions that he had been poisoned by Richards. After this, it seems that Richards returned and finding Anderson alive, unalived him with a hammer and buried his body under a coal heap in the cellar. The neighbors had, in the meantime, gathered and found Richards loading up Mrs. Harleson's goods. I cannot speak. Really, Flashman? You're gonna go there? We know what people from 1878 look like. Look at HA. Thanks, buddy. They are just coming out of you today, Flashman. Oh well, I can take it. I'm good. And Carmen, yes, snitches get stitches. Well, he snitched on, on his own unaliving. He shouldn't have done that. I got more. Let's see. Okay, here it is. So this is a thanks, Flashman. Look at him. He's like, you look good for 1878. Thanks. They might call me a sporting lady with my look today. Like, are you one of them sporting ladies? No, I am not a sporting lady. Oh, Carmen. Oh, look at you're so nice. Oh, hush, mother. People think you're my sister when I show them pictures. That's either because I look young or you look old. Whew. So this is okay. Don't do that. I wanted to scroll up, but I can't. That is him. And he does look like a fella from 1878. The unaliving of 9 persons. Um, I can't read. I think that is a book. It's his confessions. Maybe I should try to buy it. Yes, and don't remind me of that, Sir Frank Otter, because I know there's counties in Wyoming that have 0 people in them, and I would like to go populate it with me and my family. This is our county. That'll be it. Nobody else gets to come in there. You can visit, but you can't stay. Let's see. Here is a drawing of the gallows and what happened there. Nobody should move to Delphi, ever. Carmen, I'm going to clean this up. Sporting lady is an older term for women who. That's not cleaning it up. Pip dart. You left the P word in there, Carmen. The synonyms for sporting lady include, we know, 1, chore with a W, a pip tart, and a woman of the street. She'll meet you on the corner of Elm and Maple. All right, so it's weird how that's sharing. But there's a drawing of him. I like these people down here that are tearing apart the barrier. No, we all want down in the mosh pit. We all get VIP seating. I guess that's supposed to be him. No. Carmen. And the last one I have for you is, it doesn't get me in trouble. This is real. If you don't want to see it, you've been warned. This is him after everything happened, and this is an actual photo. So I'm not going to leave it up very long because, but you've all been warned. I am going to be putting it up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you don't want to look away. There he is. In all his glory. In all his, whoops. Hey, cursor. There he is. And there he goes. Bye. I don't want, okay, he's like staring at me over here. Go away. I don't know if you are commenting on the picture or the Flash fans comment. I know you've seen worse, Carmen, but some people don't want to see worse. And they always like taking pictures of people afterwards. It was kind of weird. It's like, hey, no, I didn't say I was going to show graphic images. I said some of the descriptions were graphic and I had a picture. That's not graphic. He looked okay afterwards, but he is not breathing. Some people would find that disturbing, and I, don't want to look at it. So I was just warning them. But to me, it looked like he was sleeping forever in the dirt. Oh, yes. Well, I don't know where that camera went, but I don't want it. Yes, I have heard that. And the covering of mirrors, especially down, like, I think in the South. So the mirrors didn't capture their souls or something like that. I don't know. They used to take the picture to put in the newspaper at one point to prove they were dead. I can see that too. And just think about our newspapers trying to put a picture like that in today. Good heavens, the world would end. Carmen's calling herself not normal. I did not say that. Mirrors and dolls. No for Carmen. Carmen didn't like to sleep at my mom and dad's house because at the end of the bed that in the bedroom she stayed in, there was a big dresser that had a big mirror, and she's like, she didn't want to wake up and look at herself, I guess. I don't know. But Carmen Michael's getting ready to move into that room, so he can wake up and look at himself in the mirror. But that is the story of. That is true. That is true. At least they're not staking everybody they put in the ground. Well, Flashman, it must have been a lot of it. That picture really must have showed its guts because I think it takes a lot to ruin your appetite. I will tell him that you said so, Carmen. He'll be fine. They probably need to, whatever you didn't want to see in the mirror, it probably needs the Lord to protect it from Michael. My nephew's not scared of anything except my dogs. That's the only thing I know of that he is scared of. He's scared of my Danes. I keep telling him. One would be too scared to even come up to him, and the other one would just be want to love him and love him and love him and love him forever and ever. Oh, Carmen, I know you've seen a lot. I've heard all about it. I'm not reading that. I'll just put it up there. And Tracy. I always say if there's going to be a ghost in my house, it better earn its keep. I better come home. The house better be clean. There needs to be done. Could also go grocery shopping for me because I hate to go. And if you're not going to go grocery shopping, at least make the list. At least do that. Because that is the one thing I hate doing every week. Carmen, I read your I can't even say what I read your comment as. So anyway, that is the story of Stephen D. Richards. Hello, dear. How you doing? I don't know that he was Nebraska's first serial unaliver. I didn't really find anything on that because they, as we discussed on Jolly Jane, they didn't have that term then. So was he a serial unaliver? Yeah. Was he a fast moving one? Yes. He could have been Jolly Jane's brother. None of them were jolly. None of them. They're very grumpy people. He was especially grumpy. I did find out though. I was talking to my daughter-in-law. She's a respiratory therapist, and I was asking her about atropine. Obviously, we know what morphine does, slows you down. I said, does atropine? She goes, it raises your heart rate. And I said, that explains how she was able to get her patients close to passing away and then bring them back. That's why she was giving them the atropine and the morphine. If you didn't know, I didn't know. I didn't know what that did. But that was old Jolly Jane. His name was Stephen D.E.E. Richards, or the Nebraska Fiend. I still don't know why he was the Ohio Monster. Because he got arrested there. I don't know. He lived there for a minute and then he got arrested there. Like it started there, it ended there, but he didn't unalive anybody in Ohio that I know of. Yeah, Tracy. If I heard somebody say, "Mama, come find me," from upstairs and nobody was here, yeah. If I hear it right now from downstairs and I know nobody's here and my dogs don't talk, I'm jumping out the window. He's listed for us as the first one. Yeah. So 1974 was not, despite what Flash fan thinks, 1974 was not that long ago for this to be around, as far as like there's been records around of humans and their crimes and all that stuff. Um, it's not that old. So it just wasn't a term that they would use to put on these people that went on these sprees. And that's basically kind of what he did. He just went on a spree. I don't need a parachute. Haven't you heard? As long as I've got a giant Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, Eeyore. I can't remember if she had rabbit or not. I'll be just fine. Yeah, probably more like that. Adair floaters are the worst. It is kind of like, because when you get a floater in your eye and then you're turning because you think somebody walked by you, then you know nobody walked by you because nobody should be walking by you. Absolutely. The worst. Oh, I'll take my Danes. They'll run out the back door. And so will Rue. Rabbit was bad that day, so he was in timeout and couldn't go. Oh, Plum Creek Railroad attack. I'll have to look at that. I was trying to find, so fortunately, unfortunately, Nebraska's had quite a few people that have unalived more than one person. And yeah, Ehor, that is what Carmen called Eeyore. I got to write that one down. Plum Creek Railroad attack. Makes me think of Laura Ingalls. Maybe it was Laura Ingalls. Lexington, which is down in that area. Well, the exit is off of I-80. I had to remember that. I know in my mind what I mean, but some of these places, you take the exit and then you drive to the place. And I can't remember. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time since, I don't know. Now I don't know. Sorry if I'm wrong, Sir Frank Otter. Oh, the little ankle biters. We had one of those too. Great dog. So freaking precious. The only one that ever bit anybody, he bit the UPS guy. After I told the UPS guy, do not get out of your truck because I needed to get him, he bit his boot. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, he bit my boot. I was like, I told you not to get out of your truck. My dogs would not bite you unless you reached over the fence. I can't promise you. The one that we lost at the end of August, she did not. She loved everyone, but don't reach over her. Like, if she was inside with you, best friend. If you reached over her fence, she wasn't so much. Yep, 12 p.m., even though I said 12:05 today. So, all right, that's all I've got for you. Friday, coming up on Friday, Kelly is going to be presenting Gary Ridgway. He is the Green River unaliver. And Kelly lived out there at the time he was active. So I am excited to hear her experience as being a young lady at the time and what she has to say about it all. I'm very excited for her and I cannot wait. That will be at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Adair, 11 a.m. your time of day on Friday. So I'm very excited. Back then they were still running the Oregon Trail, but yeah, I-80, get off and drive an hour to get to town. Looking at you, Hastings. That was the worst drive. I hated that one because that exit makes you feel like you're right there, and then you're like, it's not here. It's not here. Yes, Danes are just big lap dogs. Absolutely. Um, yeah. Carmen, don't confuse a dare. 12, 12, 12, 12 Eastern Standard Time, 11 Central, 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific, or specific. However you want to say it. I don't care. You do you. But it is going to be great, Kelly. And I'm very excited for you. I missed the water thingy we went to. I don't have any. Okay. Yeah. Or 1 p.m. Tracy time. I forgot. There is one more time zone from Eastern. You just think Eastern's it. It is not. There's one more. One more. You've jumped fences to get away from a Dane? Huh. Surprised you made it. What's wrong with Discord, Adair? It's easy. If I can do it, Adair, you can do it. Oh, you're talking about the lake out in Ogallala. Lake McConaughey. Awesome lake. Compared to what I have here, I can tell you. The hydro plant that was shooting water out of it very quickly. Yes, that was cool. I couldn't. You said water thingy. I had no idea what you meant, Carmen. Yes, that's it. All right, guys. I think that's it. Uh, Great Dane was not on drugs. Flashman. It did not have red eyes. Good Lord, what have you been doing? Unless it was an all white one, then he probably okay. Flashman, go eat some food. Okay, good, Carmen, because I don't have anything else to do. All right, guys, I'm going now. See you guys Friday. And that's it. See ya.